saw the response, right?
You resent your info and Bruce helped us find the ordinance.
And she gave a timeline. Director Ocha gave us a timeline for responding.
What was the date? Because I feel like it's passed.
I may have been. It was like 2 weeks. Let me look it up.
I know. I need to find that old email. Let's see.
Yeah, it was clearly. I think it was a telling response, Renee.
Yeah, I did actually talk to the chief, and he did give me some insight that he was moving forward with the items that we were inquiring about. IA.
He's in Texas, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
That exciting.
He's going to participate in the American Ninja.
He's competing in American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to see it.
Who is that?
Our new chief.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Did he share that with the public safety group, or how'd you find out?
I'm not calling.
Valeria, let's see. Wi-Fi issues.
And it did pass, Renee. She said it will be completed on Monday, March 14th.
Okay.
She said, I will provide you and the other members of the task force with a fuller answer on the status of your data request on 128 and when it will be completed on Monday, March 14th.
There we go. Yep. Okay. Well,
I think that's all we have to report, really.
Yeah. Hello, Mary Louise. Hello, Emily. Chris is there somewhere. Mary Louise, I was thinking about you last weekend when I was watching NCAA basketball for some reason. And the games. Mary Louise was the best, and I'm not just saying this, but one of the best refs in school. Fair, knew what she was talking about, was always really on top of the game for our volleyball games. Yeah. And a coach. I didn't get to experience you as a coach, but you have been a coach, right?
Yes. I started reffing when I was really young. And then I was coaching with Kathy Duquet when I was still in high school.
That's awesome.
At the deaf school. Can you imagine? I would go from my practice to hers.
Well, the crazy thing is that Mary Louise looks the same that she does when I knew her in junior high.
Except she's 50 years older. And she's aging me. That's not cool, homegirl.
No, actually, I think you were closer to my age. That's the irony, is that you were close to our age, and you were on the other, you were doing the reffing, but you were close to our age in high school. What my guess is. I don't think you were that much older than us.
Yeah, maybe not, but maybe I was. Hey, I have a question. So we're presenting tonight. And do I have permission to do the PowerPoint?
Oh, let's hope so. Do you want to?
So I sent it to you on an email in case I don't have permission.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, let's see. Who are we waiting for?
Marcella should be getting on soon.
Marcella's on. There she is. Monica's the only one that I know of that cannot join us because she had an emergency with her pet. And who else is missing? I don't think I got any emails. Chris, are you there? I think that's a yes. Okay. Valeria, are we waiting for anyone else?
Not that I can tell. Greetings, everyone.
All right. Okay, let me just write this down. Why do I feel like someone's missing? We have a guest, but I don't see the guest. Is that a guest? So there's someone on that says their initials. Oh, they're connecting.
Yeah, Al Perez is here with us. I don't see anyone else, Renee.
Okay.
I think we're...
All right. So just so we know, the person that's Al Perez, are you just listening in? If you want to reveal your camera, or?
And we don't have a chat room to engage to see. At least have that way of communicating. Let me see if I can turn on camera. So they do have access to a microphone and camera, if they like to say. And we have Eleazar Flores as well.
That's a staff person or a, go ahead, Al.
Hi everybody. My name is Eleazar Flores. Just listening in to see what you guys have to say for today. Don't mind me, I'll be in the background.
And Eleazar, can you remind us that you're working with the city and as
I'm currently an intern at the City of Santa Fe Youth and Family Services Department, supervised by Anna and Julie.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And we don't know our other guests, but welcome Al Perez, the name you have on your Zoom. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Starting our Community Health and Safety Task Force regular meeting on March 22nd, 2022 at 5:37. And we usually do our roll call just announcing who's here. We have Annie Rasquin, Bruce Finger, Emily Kaltenbach, Gino Zamora, Mary Louise Romero Betancourt, Marcela Diaz, and our facilitator Valeria Alarcon, and co-chairs me, Renee Villarreal, and Chris Rivera. All right, so we'll jump on to the communication from co-chairs. Chris, do you want to share? I missed all the email back and forth today, but I know there was some updates related to the community engagement contract with UNM Center for Social Policy. I keep saying civic policy, although there is an entity of that name, but it's social policy. So was there anything you want to update?
I was just reviewing it myself just while we were waiting here. And it looks like the contract has been sent to UNM and it's just waiting for them to look it over, make any changes, and then it'll come back to our legal department. So we're in that phase where lawyers are talking to lawyers and making sure all the language is okay.
We love that. Great. I forgot to mention Monica Alt is excused. I think some of you heard that earlier.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, Gino. I mean to say lawyers are talking to lawyers and they're working it all out.
Anything else, Chris?
No, I think that's where we're at, and it looks, I'm a little confused about our contract with Valeria. It sounds like there's funding, and then it sounds like there's not funding, but I'm pretty sure there is funding. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that one. But I think last we heard is that there is funding. We just need to figure out what the process is to renew.
Yes, very good. The other thing is that you all are aware that next week at our governing body meeting, we'll be providing a quarterly update to the council. So we've been preparing, we have a draft of a presentation that we've been working on with Valeria, and we can talk a little bit about that later on at the end of the meeting. But we're prepared to give an update, and the goal was to have some of you or all of you be present at the meeting. I think that would be helpful. It doesn't mean that all of us need to present. We can decide if there's members that want to present with Valeria and Chris and I. So we can also talk about that at the end of the meeting. But anything else on that, folks?
Sorry, Renee, that's on the 30th. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
So this is a requirement for the task force. So this is really just an update on a lot of the information sessions we've had and presentations, obviously, and then what each of the working groups have accomplished thus far. And the fact that we still don't have a staff person, we'll make sure to add that into the mix. But I think other than that, it's just really just summarizing the last 3 months.
Right. And Renee, just to confirm, March 30th at 5 or 5:30 Mountain Standard?
Well, we start our meetings at 5,
Mm-hmm.
and we have the beginning, kind of the approval minutes and all that at the beginning. So I'd say between 5 and 5:30. So those of us that are actually presenting, it'd be good to just be there at 5, so make sure that we don't have any technical difficulties. And if those of you that are able to join us, can you let us know ahead of time so we can look for your name, and or we can also send you the link to the meeting. So anything else on that, Chris, Valeria?
Perfect.
Did we talk about maybe having more than one person presenting? Did you say that? Did you mention that? Okay.
Yeah, I talked about the possibility. We haven't defined that yet. So, but I think we could talk about that at the end of the meeting.
Thanks.
Anything else? All right. I guess we lost our guest, huh? I don't see them anymore. All right. So let's move on, Valeria, to communications from the facilitator.
Yeah. So just wanted, greetings everyone and happy Tuesday. So great to be here with you. I just wanted just to, share a little gentle reminder with regards to that work plan. I know you all asked for a meeting calendar for the rest of the year so that we can start identifying the types of presentations or information sessions that you all want to coordinate and having it in one central place, so that we can also, support that coordination however we can. So I included that in the on Wednesday from after our last meeting, and also as we are preparing to produce not just the quarterly report but also update the slide deck. This is also the place where it would be great if you could include any updates other than the ones that have been shared during the meetings. Of course, I take notes vigorously and thoroughly, but I just want to make sure nothing has been missed. So if you could just take a look at that work plan and include anything that isn't reflected in there that's taken place in the last 3 months, that would be deeply appreciated. And I will resend this link. Everyone has editing access. So I'll resend this link in the follow-up email. And it would be great to have any final input, but no later than the end of this week. So that gives us time to make sure that the quarterly report is ready to go for next week. So that would be incredibly helpful. Renee, any thoughts around that in terms of due date? Thursday, Friday, I know you and I and Chris will probably need to have a working session before the 30th, just to make sure all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Yeah, and the work plan that Valeria is talking about is our internal work plan, right? Yeah. So that we are seeing where we're on track, what's kind of taking longer. We all kind of know that, but to document it. And then we take parts of those and then we're putting them into our quarterly update. So there's some things, obviously the details, we don't need all the details in the presentation to the governing body, but it does help us to make sure that we didn't miss anything, especially in the working groups that we didn't capture. So that's why there is, yeah, I would actually like it that you provide us feedback by Thursday, because Friday we actually have to submit something to,
that's right. Yeah.
To for the packet material. Granted, we can still work on things if we need to before the presentation, but you know, most of the time we never see presentations ahead of time. It's kind of interesting. And then we get them and there's less questions. And then when we submit things ahead of time, there's a lot of questions, but that's okay. I think it's important to see something ahead of time. I like to review things ahead of time when there's a presentation to the governing body. So, but we could tweak it as needed. It just would be helpful to get your feedback on that. And for Gino, who hasn't seen it, you know, just to look at that document. And I think it's fairly complete. There's just some, you know, areas that we need to fill. So just to note that, and please share.
Thank you, Renee. Yeah, thank you everyone for the effort.
All right. Anything else, Valeria?
No, I think that's good so far. Just getting all our ducks in a row for next week.
Awesome. All right. Well, the next item was working group updates. If there's any updates from our working groups that anyone wants to share from the last gathering, since the last gathering. Gino? Oh, I thought you were going to unmute there.
I'm still searching for my Zoom buttons. Our update, and Renee, please give the formal working group name that we're all part of.
And I was thinking about it because sometimes it fits and sometimes it doesn't fit in my brain. I'm like, practices and policies. Yeah. Isn't that what we call ourselves? I'm like second guessing myself here. Practices and policies, right? Policies and practices. Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, we had a good session the last time around. And I'm looking up the email where, you know, we're following up on citizen review board type of issues and ordinances and tracking a lot of the timeframes on that. And with Bruce's help, we found the originating ordinance from the late 90s, and we can build forward from there to see when the committee met, if it's ever met, and how that gets revived. It's a remaining ordinance, and I want to be a little more specific. I'm trying to talk and look up my emails at the same time. But the most interesting thing is that committee remains in ordinance and remains with the mandate of periodic meetings. But it just appears that it fell to the wayside decades ago. That's really the only update, you know, that I have from the working group. But there were other issues discussed, Annie or Bruce or Renee, if you want to add to that.
I think we also heard back from Director Ocha about the response to the questions we had. And I think she was supposed to get back to us with a time frame. We asked for a time frame for the responses, and she said the middle of this month, which is past. So we'll check in with her again.
Yep. Anything else, Bruce?
Did you want me to contact Salt Lake City? Just curious.
Not at this time. I think we were just wanting to reach that organization that does the overarching
okay, because
review.
their website, I think is pretty detailed. So something we could look at to model maybe. Anyway, that's it.
That sounds good. And the review board that we're talking about is the Citizens Police Incident Review Board that was actually started in the 80s. Didn't we figure out that it was in the mid 80s? And then we don't know if it's changed since then or if it even met. So we're in the process. I do know that the chief has looked at this document as it relates to AI and some of their practices and the internal affairs policies. So he did say that he has somebody on it helping to gather that information. So that was good to hear. Anything else from our team? All right. How about the other working groups?
I think it's just the alternative response group. We met after last meeting and talked a lot about the presentations that we were going to, that were either and Marcella and Mary Louise will be presenting tonight, and then the other presentations around fines and fees and traffic, alternative models for traffic offenses and behavioral health and drug offenses. And so we shared some ideas of how to actually organize those presentations that would be best suited for this group. And the idea of having, in some cases, like an overview, like Marcella and Mary Louise are doing, and then invite like a panel of experts. And so we were talking through like what would be best. I guess I do have a question. I apologize, Valeria. I was trying to pull up all the documents when you were talking, because we were again reiterating how important it's going to be to have a calendar so that we can reach out to those individuals for the panels. And can you state again what the plan is for that calendar so we can work backwards from those dates to get those people lined up?
Yeah. So I put together, I put together that request in the work plan.
In the work plan, okay.
Which I included in the email, you know, the action items email from the last time we met. It was the Wednesday after, Wednesday, March 9th. And so that's what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but that you all wanted a place where you can start planning for the entire year, where we're gonna schedule what presentations, right? So that we can plan ahead and frame the agendas accordingly and so forth. So let me know if that format on page, hold on, let me look.
It was a separate link that you provided us, Valeria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I went in it, I guess it'll be helpful to know from you all. There's 2 columns she created. One was policies and practices working group, and then the alternative response. And so those are their own columns. And then there's all the dates, right, for the future meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And so just a follow-up question to that, do we just put it in? What if there, or are you going to tell us the dates that we should reserve for certain presentations? Because I think that it would be hard, and this is just a recommendation, it'd be hard to have 2 separate presentations at one meeting. It may be better to have, given just time constraints. So I'm just curious with those 2 columns, how do we just go in there and put in our recommendations?
Yeah,
share.
Yeah, if you can put in your recommendations, and I agree with you, Emily. I don't think overlapping, we may want to avoid that overlap because of the time constraint, and also because what we learned from previous presentations, it's important like to create some space for Q&A, and if there's panel discussions, then there's going to be the need for time and space for people to ask questions and have dialogue or so on and so forth. So my advice would be to not overlap. There might be situations where policies and practices and alternative approaches and community engagement presentations might complement each other. And it also depends on, the length of these presentations. So there's that consideration as well, right? But I would just advise to stick to one presentation at a time, if that helps.
Thank you, Nadia. That does. And just another thought looking at this table, that maybe we should populate it with when we want our draft recommendations to be done, so that we can work backwards also from, since we have a year, when are we going to be presenting the final recommendations back to the council? Because that would help us think through, like, we wouldn't want to be doing presentations perhaps in August or September, if that's when we're going to be working. So that's just another thought for that.
Yeah, I would say that based on last year and what the trend seems to be with internally at the city, that it would be sometime in either that November 1st or November 15th, which I highlighted in yellow, but that November date we would have to confirm with the city. And so I'm sorry, Renee and Chris, we'll turn to you to confirm that with the governing body, since we don't have a city person to help us coordinate all of that. But that would be the marker. I'm just highlighting November 15th because when we presented last year, at the end of the year was November 11th.
So it's November 9th this year. And that will be the only governing body meeting in November. So that would be a target. We talked about with Marcela doing it earlier, if possible, but because things are slow going at the beginning of this quarter, I think we're gonna, I think things will take a little bit longer. So,
okay.
So I'd reserve November 9th and then December, just in case, December 14th.
Yep. Okay. Below. All right. I'm adding those as markers, team, so that we have that. Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. And I'll highlight it in yellow so that everyone can see it, that those are pretty significant dates. Great. Anything else, Emily, that can help bring more clarity?
Really helpful. Thank you. And I don't know, Marcela or Mary Louise or Chris, whether there were other updates that I didn't touch on. Thank you.
I think that was it, just the presentations we were thinking about.
I like the purple unicorn, whoever has that icon. All righty. I guess. Do we feel complete with that one? Yes. Beautiful.
So.
Okay.
Any other questions? No.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. So we are moving on to our presentation. And so I do have it possibly loaded up if you can't share, Mary Louise. Do you want to try first?
So I can't share. I can't at all. I don't have privileges for it. Marcela, do you?
Actually, I'm looking at the screen share features, and it says all participants can share. and all participants can start sharing when someone else is sharing as well. So,
so I think because I have maybe the closed captions on, but usually it's like a little green icon, but I don't have it on mine. You have it on yours?
Marcela, can you share your screen?
So while she's sharing, I want you guys to think of this question. Are you guys ready? Since Marcela and I are on, I want you to raise your hand with me and turn on those little cameras, because we're going to be honest with each other. So I want you to raise your hand with me if you've ever made a decision in your life that you wish that you would have done differently. Raise your hand with me. Okay. And I want you to raise your hand with me if you have ever fallen short with another human being. Yeah. So I want us to start off with that. And when Marcela starts, can you present her? Okay.
Councilor Villarreal, do you have the PowerPoint? Could you share it? Mary Louise said she sent it to you.
Yeah, I can share it. Let me see.
I emailed it to you.
Yeah, let's see here. Screen to PowerPoint.
So while our super Shiro, Renee, yay.
Woot woot.
Okay.
Can you see it okay?
Let me get my little lentes. Marcela, can you see it okay?
I can see it okay. You just need to start it.
Okay.
Press
start.
Well, let me see. Hold on. I'm not in PowerPoint. I just opened your document. So
if you sign into your account, it's fine. I don't care.
Hold on. Let me look here.
Sorry.
So I'll just start by saying, how many of you guys have heard of restorative justice? How many of you have been included in one of the restorative justice circles, conferences, anything? How many of you have had experiences in it? Oh, cool. So I want to share with you that I have the best job in the world. Coming from working with juvenile justice and running an alternative to detention program, restorative justice has really been the instrument that I have used with every case that I've ever worked with. So I want us to think of this. I want us to think of restorative justice as an idea that crime is a violation of people and relationships. So think about that. When we make a bad choice, we have this opportunity to think about everybody that's been affected by the choice that we've made, or if we violate by breaking the law, right? A lot of what happens is that violations are looked at in a punitive way. And so there's really never any bridge building. Are we trying to still get the PowerPoint? Because I'm doing a lot of talking, and Marcela, I could see your face and you're going.
Well, it's in the form of a Google Doc, so I can't move it into my PowerPoint.
You can just share it as you were sharing it. It's fine.
Yeah.
You can share. It is not a PowerPoint. It's a Google presentation. So you should be able to share the Google presentation when you open up your Google account.
So, so I'll start with just by violations. When we talk about violations, they they create obligations. And so restorative justice looks to heal the harm. So let's think about that. And I want to share with you guys that before we had juvenile probation officers, before we had police officers and judges, the indigenous people would bring in their village and they would use a beautiful talking piece, and they would, in a circle, talk about what violation had happened and who had been harmed by the behavior in the village. And after we decided that we needed to have a different judicial system, kind of they abolished the restorative justice practices. But I want everyone to just envision that when someone, you know, breaks the code of conduct in school, I'll give you an example of that. You know, before we had restorative justice, what would happen is a student would get suspended, and then the student would come back and behavior wouldn't change. So I want us to think about that. And when you think about crime in our community, sometimes in the courtroom, a victim is still feeling like a victim because they've been re-victimized by the way the court system has handled the case. And the offender, the person of concern, and that's what we use as the language, walks away, and there's been no healing done. So our community is still broken. And I want to open with each of us thinking about a time when we fell short and we never got to make right our wrong, because for many reasons. So restorative justice looks to repair the harm and to heal the harm by bringing people together and giving them an opportunity to have a voice, by recognizing that we're human and that we fall short. One of the things that I want to share before we switch the slide is I want us to think of this. If you're a mom or if you're a dad, sometimes our kids make a bad choice. They have a speed bump. And so what I tell parents is the way I explain restorative justice is we get to separate the person from the behavior. I love you, but I don't have to love what you did. And when it comes to crime, this is what you did, but it doesn't mean you're a bad person. And I want to start by that. So Marcela, I'll let you, if you want to add anything to this slide, please do.
Sure. Thank you, Mary Louise. I really appreciate that you kind of started with sort of what's at the heart of RJ, or restorative justice. And many people of color, communities of color, organizations, community groups across the country, you know, some of us refer to it as restorative justice, some as reparative justice, and others as transformative justice. There's sort of a spectrum of ways to think about what RJ does. But basically, it is an answer to a system for the last 30 years, a tough on crime approach that just simply hasn't worked. And so, you know, we all know, and we're on this committee because we understand that there are problems within the system that need to be addressed. And this 30-year tough on crime era has just had devastating effects on people of color, families, children, communities, whole communities. And so what we know is that since the 80s, there's been a 500% increase in incarceration, but we're not safer. Crime rates are very similar. Recidivism is not going down. In fact, it's gone up. And more importantly, for folks who are really trying to understand sort of the origins of RJ, victims are not really given a strong voice in the current criminal justice system and are not healed by the current system. Public safety and the criminal justice apparatus has become very expensive. And it often far exceeds the money that is spent on education, health in many state budgets, including ours in New Mexico. And then, of course, we know that it harms families and children who have to face separation because loss of income. And, you know, we've been talking about fines and fees. There are so many ways that it impacts children and families and other social determinants of health. And so restorative justice programs, both for youth and as adults, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we think we should be taking a look at, and we're going to be inviting some of the practitioners within those programs to join us as a part of a RJ panel presentation. But we know that RJ is sort of a fast-growing national and international social movement, and a philosophical approach that Mary Louise has already sort of talked about, that focuses on the needs of the victim and the offender as well as the involved community. And so we'll talk a little bit about how it's emerged after we talk about some of the principles on the next slide. Somebody has to change it to the next slide, though. There it is. So the system that isn't working, that is really harming families, communities, really expensive system that hasn't had the kinds of results that we've wanted, is the traditional US justice system. And the principles in that system that we're trying to contrast to the principles of RJ is that, crime is a violation of the law and the state. It's very hard to think of crime as anything else other than that within our current system. That justice requires the state to determine blame. So the state, through its judges, through its jury, determine guilt and impose pain or punishment. Victims have very little voice in this, despite burgeoning in the 80s, in the 70s victims' rights movements. Punishment, which is usually in the form of incarceration or detention, can also be, fines and fees. Monica often talks about that. And it's also about taking away rights from people. And we know that there has been a major effort to restore, even in this state, to restore rights to felons to vote, for instance. But so many other rights are taken away as a result of incarceration, records that organizations like, DPA, Drug Policy Alliance, have really fought back, ban the box, making sure that people can still rent despite felonies on their records, et cetera. Our current system really is about retribution and vengeance. It responds to one harm with a second harm. And it's really based on this idea of just desserts, right? If someone suffers, the person responsible also must suffer. And it really, and sort of the basis of it is offenders get what they deserve. And that's basically what our whole system is set on. Mary Louise, do you want to add anything to this? Mary Louise?
Muted. Sorry. No, I think that you covered that.
Okay. So if you go to the next slide, we know that, so on the left-hand side, it's the sort of the current justice system. On the right-hand side, what RJ really aspires to nationally and globally. So much like the previous slide, we harm people and their families and their communities who harm people to show the world that harming people is wrong. And this is an endless cycle of harm. And the basis of our current system. And RJ tries to disrupt this by including victims' voice and also including a repair of the harm and the damage to a community that is done by these broken rules, by the tearing of the fabric of the community that results usually from crime and other forms of transgressions. Justice focuses on the offender, not the victim. RJ focuses on the person and the people harmed, the community harmed, and it also is based in empathy, accountability, prevention of recurrence, and healing. So they're just really two completely different approaches to dealing with crime in general. And again, we often think of restorative justice programs. My mom is a kindergarten teacher in California, for instance, and there's just this major drive to retrain teachers in their classroom management and in their discipline and principles and vice principals, et cetera, in restorative justice practices. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but a lot of this work has also really been broadened to adult diversion programs. And we're going to give some really key examples of that later on.
So I want to add that if you look at the two boxes that are on this PowerPoint, the traditional approach asks, what rule was broken, right? And the restorative justice approach asks, who was affected? Who was hurt and affected by the behavior? Traditional, who did it? And of course, in restorative justice, we look at what are their needs. And later on, I'll share stories about what that means. And it'll be important because when you hear a live story of how restorative justice responds to misbehavior, it's huge. So the final one is, how should we punish them? That's what the juvenile justice system looks like. That's what the adult system looks like. And restorative justice is giving people an opportunity to have a voice. Who's obligated to meet those needs? So think about that. Sometimes those needs are just resources, right? And but there's sometimes those needs that you can't even describe until you have those conversations and you're giving people a safe space to have a voice and to share the gift of listening. But you can switch the slide now.
I do want to add, just to reiterate that, here it is on this slide, right? So before, in 2 slides before this, we talked about, crime being a crime against the state. The state metes out punishment, government institutions. But in looking at it from an RJ perspective, really, as Mary Louise has already mentioned, crime is a violation of people and relationships. It's a violation of each other in our social compact. And so it really is trying to create a paradigm shift that is, from a justice that harms to a justice that heals. And so often you'll hear RJ practitioners talking about healing circles, healing, repairing the harm. How do we heal a community where a major trust has been broken? It also it works to repair damage caused by the crime in the community rather than locking away the person. I mean, this is just obvious to all of us, right? Instead of sort of taking the person that committed the crime, the transgression, out of the community and not able to in any way, pay restitution, try to repair the harm, try to empathize, try to have accountability. The accountability is taken away from the community and put back into the hands of the state. It focuses, RJ, on the person who is harmed. So that's the victim and all the others impacted in the community. And it also includes the person who is harmed and supports her in making different choices. And I've done a lot of restorative justice circles with youth in New Mexico, in Santa Fe. And one of the things that we always, I go into these circles, and we'll talk a little bit about what these circles look like, but part of it is how do I help equalize some of the power in this room is one, and two, how can the result of this be in helping this person, who we call the person of concern, make better choices in the future, and not just decide to make better choices in the future, but to have support from other community members to actually help that person make better choices in the future. These are all just sort of the buzzwords that you're going to hear in relation to RJ, empathy, accountability, prevention, healing. And it also addresses often and recognizes the social conditions that often lead to crime in our communities. And one of the things that Monica has often reminded us is that often perpetrators, offenders, we call them in our RJ circles, persons of concern, oftentimes they are also victims, whether they are victims of crime. They are often also subjected to conditions in schools and institutions that are very unfavorable to them. And so all of that we're able to bring that up in a healing circle or a restorative justice circle or in a restorative justice process. It recognizes that a community isn't only going to take credit for the good things that people do, the prizes that we win, the good things that we come out in the paper about, but we're also going to take full responsibility for the bad things that we do as a community. And so that's, we keep the person within the community and don't extricate the person from the community because he or she made a really terrible choice.
We can switch the slide. So I think that Marcela and I have been both talking about what restorative justice does. And I really want us to focus on thinking, if you've ever been a victim before, how victims sometimes don't have a choice in a judicial system. And so restorative justice gives the victims an opportunity to talk about how they were affected and they were impacted by the behavior, right? And offenders get to listen to what that was and what that is. And so on this slide, I want to share a little story with you. I couldn't decide which story that I should share, but I think that I'm going to share this one. When I was working with juvenile justice, there was a young man. Well, let's just think of this. There's a 38-year-old man in the hospital that's been stabbed 6 times, and he almost lost his life. He has 2 children, a wife, and he's raising a 15-year-old niece who was dating a 16-year-old boy. And both of them together had a baby. So I want to share with you that the client that I was working with was a 16-year-old boy that was dating this 38-year-old's niece. The niece had lost her mom and her dad to drug overdoses. This boy that was dating the niece had lost his dad, never met his mom. I guess his mom abandoned him when he was a baby. So he was living with a 70-year-old grandpa. And so anyhow, I was given the beautiful opportunity to bring this young man to face the man that he had stabbed 6 times. So I'll share a little background. The young man came to see his girlfriend who did not want to see him. The uncle answered the door and said, she doesn't want to see you, so you need to get the heck out of Dodge. And he was high and he had a knife. And he decided that he was going to make his way in so that he could see his girlfriend that didn't want to see him and the baby. And he ended up stabbing the 38-year-old man. So we come together in this circle, and it's the 38-year-old man that spent 3 months in the hospital because they severed his liver. This young boy was, I was the alternative to detention program. I got to supervise him while he was released. And we worked on a lot of things, including his schooling. He was doing a GED program. He passed, while he was working with me, he passed 3 tests. He had 3 more to go. And I actually convinced the family that this young man had a baby with the niece, if they would be willing to participate in a restorative justice. It was actually ordered in court that he face the victim. And so I want to share with you that before all of this happened, this 16-year-old boy spent a lot of time with his family. And the 38-year-old man was a plumber, and he used to allow him to come and work with him, and he would make money. And so anyhow, we are in this circle. So I want you to imagine there's a 38-year-old man who's a victim, his wife, two kids. One of them is 10 years old and one of them is 6. And then the girlfriend, and then this baby. And this young man, he was willing to be there mentally, physically, emotionally. He knew that the impact that he had made on that family was huge, right? But everybody was willing to come into that circle. His grandfather was also there. And I want you to know that this young man got to listen to the 38-year-old man talk about what it was like to be in the hospital and what was happening for him that day. And this, his wife got to talk about how her children almost lost their father. And here is this young man listening to these people that were victimized by his behavior, by the response to his drug use, right? And then he got to hear the 10-year-old little girl say, my daddy almost died. I almost did not have a daddy. And this young man is taking all of this in, and he's weeping and he's talking. And then it was his turn after all of his actual girlfriend got to talk, and she hadn't seen him. And it was his turn to talk, and he talked about how he knew that he could maybe never be accepted into that family again. But he got to talk about how sorry he was and how he knew that the impact that he had made on the family could never probably be forgiven. But he wanted to use his voice to say how he felt not only about what he had done, but listening to the people that his behavior affected. So we always talk in restorative justice about, like, what are your plans? What are your goals in life? And this young man got to talk about how this 38-year-old man had impacted his life in such a way that he wanted to become a plumber. He said, you changed my life. You were the one person that loved me when I didn't feel loved. You were the one person in the family that accepted me. And even with my flaws, knowing that I didn't know a lot, I didn't have a lot, but you made me feel like I was part of. And I always needed to feel like I had a sense of belonging. That's what restorative justice is about creating that sense of belonging, right? This 38-year-old man said, not only do I forgive you, but I want you to know that I want you to be a dad to your baby. And I want to be an example of what it means to be a father. And I want you to know that not only do I forgive you, but what you did allowed me to clean my life up. So even though I had to be in the hospital, I was doing things that weren't me at my best. So there was so much healing and a lot of tears. And I hope that you can feel what I got to feel, just a little bit of it. This man said, I welcome you back and I will be your mentor because I want you to become the plumber that you have always dreamt to be. And so healing happened in front of my eyes, right? It was the most beautiful and the most, like, I could go home that night and know that I was better because of what they taught me, right? So fast forward, I'm at Ross Dress for Less. This is 2-3 years later, right? And this man, he's not the kid anymore, right? He comes up to me and he's like, Mary Louise, and he hugs me and I hug him back, but I have no idea who he is. And he says, it's me, and I don't want to use people's names, but hey, and he yells for his girlfriend to come. And his little girl is now 3 years old, right? And he picks up his daughter and the girl comes and she hugs me and she remembers me too. Sad that I didn't remember them. But he says, I got my license. I'm a plumber. And he says, you don't remember who we are, do you? And I said, help me remember, because I work with a lot of kids. And he says, it's me. You changed my life. It's because of you that so-and-so allowed me to be, he mentored me, and now I have my license, and I'm doing good. I've been clean for 3 years now. My life has changed tremendously, and I'm a dad, and I'm a good dad. And there was his significant other speaking on his behalf, and there was this little girl clenching, just hugging her daddy. And so her daddy says, will you please give Mary Louise a hug? Because it's because of Mary Louise that you have a dad now. And that wasn't true. But I want to tell you that it was because of restorative justice, because of the program that allowed healing to happen and to make our community better, one person at a time. And you can switch the slide, because hopefully Marcela's next.
Thank you for sharing that story, Mary Louise. For those of us, I'm sure Mary Louise has been doing this far more years than I have, but there are so many incredible stories of circles that we've facilitated and that have really helped, particularly young people, just have a support system, and also recognize the failures of institutions towards young people at the same time within these circles. And so we also address those in RJ, and it's very similar for adults. So we kind of, we're going to sort of shift. These are the principles with some excellent stories that Mary Louise has shared into sort of the practices, right? The practical. And we know that RJ is a young field that emerged in the 70s, and mostly as alternative approaches to the court system at that time, and alternative dispute resolution was really becoming much bigger at that point, and it emerged alongside the victims' rights movement, which argued for greater involvement of crime victims in criminal justice proceedings. Now, we know, as Mary Louise mentioned, that indigenous practices from all over the world really undergird the philosophy of the movement. But in the 80s, we really started to see more programs proliferate in North America. They're not exactly like the programs we have now, but they were programs. Some of the programs we have like this now, but programs where offenders had to meet with their victims, pay restitutions for their crimes, and we started seeing this emerge. But they were very small in scope without a lot of systemic impact. And so that really began to change in the mid-90s as we saw a parallel, incredible institutional and statutory challenges for our communities. I mean, really Tough on Crime in the 90s came to a major head, and has sort of been is continuing for these years up until most recently. But RJ really advanced in 1994 when the American Bar Association endorsed victim and offender mediation. And so we started seeing a lot more victim offender mediation. We still saw punishment for offenders, but they often volunteered or were required to do that kind of mediation with their victims. We also saw support come from the National Organization for Victim Assistance, and later, internationally, the United Nations, the Council of Europe, and the European Union really start to embed RJ programs, language, funding into their documents, into their policies and regulations. And in fact, about 30 states have restorative justice principles in their either mission statements, their regulations, their policies, their funding. New Mexico really is far behind. I mean, if we could look just to our neighbors to the north, Colorado has passed a few laws, statewide laws, that really invest a lot of money, not just in schools and in youth programs, but also in diversion programs. And we're going to give you some examples of that on the next slide. So some of the RJ programs, not all of them are diversion programs, but some of them are, is, diversion programs or restorative justice courts, for instance. And we'll give you some examples of that. Community group conferencing, also known as healing circles, talking circles, peace circles, and what I practice, we don't call it a healing circle or a talking circle. We call it a community group conference or a family group conference. Reentry panels or reentry circles for when folks come out of incarceration. Then there are other programs that are like facilitated community and police dialogues or truth and reconciliation commissions or programs. And we've seen that internationally, certainly. And we've also seen that in some instances here in the United States. And the TRC processes are usually designed to publicly examine a traumatic event in a community, a divisive event in a community, with a restorative justice approach, seeking to heal community, build understanding, grow trust, and give victims, witnesses, and offenders the ability to publicly tell their stories without prosecution. That's generally what the TRC processes are about. We have pre-booking diversion programs and other alternative programs for offenders. And then again, one of the tried and true, I don't know why I don't have a little picture on there, but just a blank circle, that's victim offender mediation. Those are a lot of the programs that we have seen. Now, there are different types of diversion RJ programs. Some are pre-trial diversion programs, pre-filing before charges are filed with the court, or post-filing after the court process begins, but before a disposition. And so these are, there are just so many different approaches, particularly for adults. And so we can go to the next slide. A lot of community groups have had to fight for and campaign for RJ programs and RJ campaigns. I somehow got out of my Zoom. And so what we see here is, campaigns that are youth or people of color led, ending zero tolerance policies at schools, or limiting or eliminating suspension, expulsions in schools, and in trading them for RJ-based program is one example of a youth-led and people of color-led campaign in many places. There are pre-diversion programs like in Longmont, Colorado. We'll talk a little bit about that, where instead of, so this is pre-booking, so in pre-arrest diversion programs that we want to explore. So instead of having folks go to or get arrested for a particular crime, they get immediately diverted into a program. And that's similar to LEAD or Thrive, but for other types of non-substance use related crimes that are committed. Restorative justice courts, neighborhood courts, these are popping up in places like Chicago. I'm going to give a few examples on the next slide, I think. Truth and reconciliation projects like in Greensboro, North Carolina, and reparation campaigns is also under the rubric of RJ campaigns, and state laws requiring more funding like the one I mentioned in Colorado for youth and adults. Can you go to the next one, please? What we see, and when we do our report, we're going to put in a lot of information and cite all of the reports, but this is sort of introductory, but there's been a lot of research on the effectiveness of both youth and adult diversion and RJ programs that really are pretty tremendous. And I'm sure Mary Louise probably keeps track of recidivism in the schools for all the programs and sort of victim satisfaction rates, et cetera. But what we know is that, the vast majority of the research on RJ programs shows reduced recurrence, reduced recidivism by the offenders that are involved, decrease incarceration of young people and others, lower costs within that particular local criminal justice system, which can be used for a range of other programs, treatment, youth, prevention programs, education programs. One of the things that I think is pretty impactful, and I've seen this in the circles that I've been a part of, is really high participant satisfaction rates. And that means victims, members of the community, public safety officials, and of course, and also offenders. And all of that leads to growing trust in our communities. And we've also seen that in the schools, it has helped reduce racial disparities in discipline, suspension, and expulsions. And so there's just a wide body of research that shows that these things are working where they are applied effectively throughout our country. And so we will be putting a lot of that information in the final report when we're just giving examples of really some programs that we might be able to pilot here in Santa Fe. There was a really large-scale study, and it was a meta analysis of 12,000 juveniles, young people, and there was also a randomized control trial of victims of robbery and burglary, and it found that 1/3 of the victims of robbery and burglary had fewer PTSD symptoms than those in the control group when they went through this process and met with the person who actually robbed them or came into their home or vehicle. And that's pretty significant for victims of crime and how it really helps them be able to process and heal and get closure and meet the person and their whole humanity. About 80% in these Bajer analysis found that participants reported that the whole dialogue process had a profound impact on their lives. Offenders felt ownership and remorse and accountability, and they saw their victims as human beings. And often victims saw their offenders as human beings, and it just completely changed their relationship to the incident itself. And so these are things that we will make sure that we include in our report. But basically, all of the analysis is going to show what you see on your screen right now. Can you go to the next one? Can you go to the next one, actually, please? So some of the programs that we are probably going to invite to participate in panel, and maybe getting feedback from you all might make sense as well, are programs that are, pre-booking, diversionary, some that are run by DAs, some by local community groups in partnership with their law enforcement officials. But, one, for instance, is the San Francisco Neighborhood Court. This is a neighborhood court, and it's a pre-filing diversion program, and it enlists trained court adjudicators, which are community members that are trained to facilitate RJ circles and who are trained in RJ principles and practices. They actually conduct hearings with people arrested on certain misdemeanors and felonies, and they involve community members in prosecutorial decision-making. Now, all of that language feels not very RJ, but RJ is a big part of that whole process. And so defendants meet with the adjudicators and discuss the incident, and as well as their restorative needs as defendants, and then potential agreements that are made for them not to, for them to be able to continue with their diversion processes, writing letters of apology, writing reflective essays, doing community service, doing needs-based classes, CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, and other programming in the community. And so that's one example in San Francisco that seems to be pretty effective, although there is, as you all know, a major pushback right now on these kinds of programs nationwide, and that's absolutely true with the DA in San Francisco at this moment. The Red Hook Community Justice Center is based out of Brooklyn, and they handle low-level criminal cases, including selected felonies, as well as family court and civil matters. And Red Hook really tries to offer a more holistic and coordinated judicial response. And so they have restitution projects like, painting over graffiti and beautifying local parks, for instance. They also operate a whole peacemaking program building on Native American approaches to justice. They have a whole core of facilitated trained volunteers from the community to support that. They link defendants to drug treatment and providing on-site services at the Justice Center. And they really are just seeking to help individuals avoid further involvement in the court system. They also have a victim assistance program through the center, and they provide a range of client-centered and trauma-informed services. And so they kind of, it's a very holistic approach. And it's pretty tremendous. They kind of do a little bit of everything. And so that's one of the things that we might want to take a look at. The Longmont Community Justice Partnership, which I actually got trained under as well in Colorado, that is slightly different. It's not seated within the DA's office, or it's not a program that is managed by a DA. And it is really a community-based program. And it's been recognized nationally for its unique approach and model, and its close ties to city law enforcement. And so at Longmont, all new officers go through an orientation. All officers basically have to go through restorative justice training through the partnership. And so they know, they also have a quota system. So they know they're expected to refer people to the pre-arrest restorative justice diversion program. And it holds a community conference circle, and it includes law enforcement, it includes community, it includes advocates, and it's not just young people, it's also adults that they have going through that process. So instead of the wrong kind of quotas, they have the right kind of quotas, and they're diversionary quotas. And so they're close to home, and they certainly have had a big role in helping shift Colorado when it comes to its criminal justice system and its focus on and in deep investment in RJ programs, which again, I want to remind folks, New Mexico has not done in any way, shape, or form. We have a few key programs, but not like the 30 states or so that have really decided that they're going to invest deeply in these approaches. Manhattan Justice Opportunities is another program, and this is DA-led, and it's in partnership with judges, all the attorneys involved, and community organizations, and it operates two major initiatives. One program provides meaningful alternatives to jail, fines, and convictions for hundreds of people charged with low-level misdemeanor offenses each year. I think we're going to include some of this in I think Monica will also include this, as well as Emily, in some of the panel presentations that we're organizing as a subcommittee. And we can also have folks from the Manhattan Justice Opportunities Project come and talk to our group. It's located right next to their criminal court, and it's a really fantastic misdemeanor program. They're also, and they do individual counseling, case management, healthcare services, education opportunities, and job readiness. That is post-arrest and post-booking diversion, which is slightly different than the Longmont, Colorado model. They just started a second partnership with their, they just started a new program in 2019 that also provides holistic community-based programming and treatment instead of prison sentences for people charged with certain felonies. And it really is a first of its kind alternative approach to court in the country. And so we might want to take a look at that as well. And then I like Greensboro because of just incidents that have happened here in Santa Fe. The Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission is also a form of restorative justice, but it's much more public. It's not about individuals and their individual. It really is about a major event, divisive event that has happened in a community, and a traumatic event that has happened in a community. Theirs probably slightly more traumatic than ours, but the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started as a body to seek truth and healing and transformation for Greensboro. And that was a city that was left divided and weakened by the events that took place in 1979. And 5 community residents were killed by the KKK and the American Nazi movement at a local protest. And so the commission was 7 commissioners, a respected group of individuals selected for their diverse perspectives, strengths, and so they created this system, this whole process through which people who were still alive could talk about what that meant to them back then, and also the impacts that it's had on the community since. And so it's a just look them up on Wikipedia. They've created these amazing documents and just an amazing process for people to really heal as a community today for an incident that happened over 30 years ago. And so those are examples that we can be looking at, in the courts, that are DA-led, that are community-led. There are so many different approaches. I can say, from my perspective, a lot of money will go to, and in fact, the ABA and the Department of Justice gives big grants to pursue restorative justice programs. And I know that our DA got a big grant to do that. And yet, if we're not actually just giving opportunities for people to really understand the limits, but also the potential of RJ programs. Just because you do one program here or one program there, no, we have to change a culture in our community. And it feels like Santa Fe might be ripe to really start investing in some of these deeper adult diversionary programs. But we have to do a lot of education of our community. One thing I do want to add, and we're going to have one more slide, and I'm sorry if this has gone long, but Mary Louise is going to talk a little bit about community conferencing and healing circles. But I do want to mention that, the Drug Policy Alliance, Somos un Pueblo Unido, the NAACP, and many other community groups came together in 2009 to pass a prohibition, a bias-based policing ban at the state level. And then Somos, we worked with our local police department to actually turn it into procedures and policies here in Santa Fe. And we really do have one of the strongest and best bias-based policing prohibition policies in the state. And we looked and have every community, every city and every county's policies. And so in that, there is, and I say this because of conflicts that we have seen. We often think not just about punishing people who are committing crimes in our communities, but oftentimes we also think about accountability and punishment when it comes to law enforcement officials that also transgress and do things in our communities that they should not be doing, and hurting communities and hurting the trust in our communities. And so we know that's not everybody, but when it does happen, the bias-based policing ban at the state level calls for, and I'm going to read it here because I have it on my screen, as part of a law enforcement agency's administrative complaint procedures, the law enforcement agency shall, at a minimum, and then it gives a bunch of requirements, investigating a complaint, and publishing the results and sending the results to the Attorney General. There's a lot of things that we included in that law, but one of them is take appropriate measures to discipline a law enforcement officer, including facilitating mediation or other restorative justice measures, when it is determined that the law enforcement officer violated the provisions of the Prohibition of Profiling Practices Act. And I guarantee you that no one in our local police department, when there is an IA investigation, discipline, and I know because a lot of complaints have actually come through the Santa Fe Immigration Committee. And so what we've seen is that there really isn't an effort for mediation or approaching the people who actually made the complaint and have a dialogue or a conversation between them and the police officer, which is helpful to the individuals as well as the law enforcement agent. And I'm going to give one example of a case that Somos worked on. It was a community member of Somos un Pueblo Unido in Hobbs, New Mexico. And this was a few years back. There was a new police chief, and there was a local law enforcement agent that ended up calling ICE at a local casino because the casino called them and a person provided an ID that was the Mexican consular ID card, and they had never seen it and they wouldn't give it back. And so they called the police, and then the police came, and it was they ended up calling ICE and saying, we don't know if this is if this is correct. They don't have a driver's license. We don't know if this is a fraudulent card. Can you come please and check it out? And of course, when ICE came, they ended up deporting the person because in fact, the person was undocumented. And so this was a deep breach of trust in the community. And so there were complaints. We reached out to the NAACP. We talked about what it meant for bias-based policing. Well, the new police chief, so they investigated, it turned into, because it was a community process between SOMOS, the NAACP, and the police department and the city council, they rectified their mistakes. They put in procedures when they saw consular ID cards in the future. They created a relationship with the Mexican consulate so that they could reach out to them directly if they had questions about their government ID card out of El Paso. And the most important thing is that the police chief came to the family's home and personally apologized and said, I am so sorry this happened on my watch. That whole process was so important for community safety and trust in that community. And so it's something that we don't do in Santa Fe, and we really need to start thinking about ways to incorporate RJ in all of our disciplinary processes. Mary Louise, you're up to next.
I think we're on the community conferencing, right? And the circle. So I just want to give you guys a quick, because you've been on for so long and we're probably boring you, and that's not our intentions. I want every person to get off this Zoom call tonight better than you were before you walked in, so that we can, as a community, really think about how we can repair the harm with people that we've fallen short with. But I want to share this with you. In the schools, the way I do healing circles is, I don't know if any of you remember the little boy that passed away at Gonzales Elementary. He was in an accident with his papa, with his dad. His dad was a basketball coach, and the little boy was a student there. And so I was called in because they had called in grief counseling, and the kids were really still broken because there had been some broken relationships with the boy that passed away, sometimes even called bullying behaviors, right? And so I had the beautiful opportunity to come into this class and create a safe space for students to recognize that when we fall short, that we can repair the harm. And so we left an open chair so that if that kid that we lost was there, what we would want to tell him, so that that day when the kids went home, they were sleeping better at night. And so what I can tell you is these young people teach me every day, and I'm willing to be a student, is some of these kids forgave the little boy for the things that he had done, because that's what they needed to do to clear their hearts. And then others apologized for their behavior with him. But we also recognize that because the dad was a coach, we did another circle about how we could heal. If he was there, what would we be thankful for? So healing circles are used for a lot of different things. One of the things that I'll be using a healing circle is I just got asked if I could do some work with CYFD, the new secretary, Judge Barbara V. Hill. She used to see the difference in kids that I worked with in her courtroom. So she reached out to me and she asked me if I could do a training with her top executives. And one of the things that I will be doing is a circle so that people can recognize what's gotten in the way of them being at their best. And I share that with you because if you are a department leader, I would love to share a talking piece with you and to give you a little bit of information about how you can create that culture that we deserve to have with every relationship that we build or break. And Marcela, I want you to add, I know that you've done a lot of conferencing. I have too, but the work that I think that we do that is in parallel, any type of restorative justice is important restorative justice, but no restorative justice leaves people with a hole in their hearts. And when we haven't been able to make right or wrong, or someone hasn't forgiven us, we are left with this is what I call it, the prison that we choose to live in by not forgiving. Go ahead, Marcela.
Well, I don't know what to say after that. That's exactly right. I mean, the community conferencing has been used. It's a form of mediation, but it uses mediation practices and techniques within a circle. But I can tell you that in the conferences that I've participated in, what it does is it gives an opportunity for every person in the circle, so community members, witnesses, people impacted at large. I started doing RJ as a community member. So someone who didn't know the person who was harmed or the person who did the harming, just as a community member who was impacted and was able to really be able to see the transformation that could take place for folks. A lot of folks, you know, in the circles that I did were young people who really were in many ways failed by a lot of institutions. And so my goal in every RJ circle is to nivelar, is to sort of balance the power in the room and really see what harms we've all experienced as a community relating to an incident that took place either in a school or in the community. Both were, I worked with both. And so I really, I'm just gonna be honest. I am a big, I like policy change. I like institutional change. I'm not an each one reach one kind of a person. That's not where my heart and my mind is. I love people who do that. But I joined RJ because I felt like we needed to do more to keep young people of color out of jail and stopping that cycle. That's why I did it. And I was always had the mind, how do we make it bigger? How can we change institutions? How can we really change a culture in a community? But I myself was transformed through the RJ process and realized that in practicing it, it can be transformational for the people who are involved in any way, shape, or form. And that's really what the research shows as well. So hopefully we can figure out as a committee what are doable practices and programs that we might pilot and get funding for in our city. And that's it. We don't have to do the last one because I think it's just a repetitive slide. But I would like you to stop the slideshow and just have a conversation, a discussion, questions. Also, we want to know, we're not going to have time to have everyone for every really great RJ diversion program in the criminal justice system for adults. So we would like feedback from you. What are some of the examples that we gave that you really want to delve into for the purposes of this committee? And we'll invite them. Or questions, or comments.
Thank you both.
On the agenda.
That's pretty impressive. I really appreciate that you all had not just visuals, but you can elaborate on so many of the I guess the points of RJ that I never really understood. And so I appreciate the hard work to put this together and the impact that you both have made in different circles and the work you do around RJ in your personal and probably professional and personal lives. So thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open it to questions from our members or even guests if you have any. I think Emily's hand is up.
Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you. This was awesome. The presentation was really great. And so my first comment is just how we can give this presentation out to a wider audience, like to the council. I was just thinking the various city committees and the council and the community. So I just think it was really well done. It was clear. Having those examples are really powerful. So, and I thought I knew a lot about restorative justice, but I learned a lot, and I think it's so powerful. So a couple thoughts and then questions. One, I think about, using this restorative justice framework for the individual one-on-one. And then Marcella, what you were saying is that you really think about sort of the system and the policies. And I feel like there's an opportunity to use this framework in everything this committee's doing, because of the harms that our policies and our systems are having on community. So, you know, there can be a victim and a person of concern, but there's also, you know, I feel like our role is about sort of utilizing this framework around our systems and policies and practices and community harm. So I guess just, and I know that must seem like completely, I don't know why I think this is such an aha moment, but just thinking about like how important it is that we're doing this community listening, because I feel like that is in the spirit of RJ. And I'm just wondering how we might be able to think about this community engagement process. And I don't know, could we have a circle? Like, could we think of like actually committing this framework of like what we hear from the community and, you know, who's the other side of it? So the victim and the perpetrator, you know, use it. I don't like to use that language, but anyway, so that's just one question. The other thing I was thinking about while you were talking about is like what types of offenses, and I also don't like using that language, but that's, you know, like are relevant for a framework like this and which ones aren't. Because I was just thinking about like victimless crime. And, you know, in my opinion, a lot of illicit drug use is victimless crime, right? That they're really, I mean, there may be someone that feels harmed, whether that's a family member or school, you know, I can see that it would work in some cases, but not all. And so just thinking through, well, the question is, would an RJ framework still work? Or what are some of those so-called victimless crime that could still benefit from this model? And if not, what is that alternative response we should also be thinking about? So those were my thoughts and questions, but thank you so much. I really enjoyed this very much.
That makes us happy. We were originally going to do 20 minutes, but we were like, we have the whole hour, so let's just do it. I do want to respond, Emily, to a couple of things, and it's one of the slides that we skipped. There are, you know, obviously, so yes, there is real crime that happens in our communities that we have to address and that we would like to have an alternative approach to addressing. But obviously, as you mentioned, there are harms that our current policies and institutions are, you know, our current policies and institutions are perpetrating harm against people in our community. And so part of transformative justice really is stopping some of those harms. And then really doing the RJ for harms that actually are happening and transgressions and crime and breaking of trust. And so one of the things that, you know, there are things that we support and that we can support in this process as a task force that aren't necessarily RJ, right? That are not restorative justice. So I actually had a whole slide on criminal justice reforms that don't have RJ, but that we still support, right? Like legalizing certain drugs or all drugs, sentencing reform, police accountability measures, even in my realm, sanctuary policies that create classes and for, you know, for immigrants that create classes of criminals. So, you know, usually sanctuary policies allow for certain people to be turned over to ICE and others not. Well, that's better than nothing, but it's not restorative justice either. Diversion programs for people who commit crimes because they're dependent on certain kinds of drugs, that can be a form of RJ, but if it doesn't include an RJ framework in it, then it's just a diversion program that's probably really important, but not necessarily RJ. And then other examples that we use is like Teen Court. And so Teen Court is a great program that a lot of people like, but it's not RJ because it mimics the regular criminal justice system for teens, where, you know, someone is meting out the justice and there's usually punishment. And so unless Teen Court really incorporates like a neighborhood court, like these RJ practices, like like the court in Brooklyn or the neighborhood court in San Francisco or in Brooklyn, then it's not RJ. And so I just wanted to add that in response to what you said. We have to stop the harms that institutions and policies are perpetrating against our people while creating a new approach at how people respond to each other when crimes are committed, because crimes are committed, as obviously that's not going to stop, right? Is that I was trying to respond a little bit to what you were saying, and I hope that that helped. But yeah, we should incorporate RJ into the community engagement process.
Emily, did you have any other questions?
No, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Annie, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanna do a comment. So it sounds the restorative justice PowerPoint reminded me of there was this person that came into one of my New Mexico Highlands classes, and he was I think he was part of Big Brothers Big Sisters, where they would like mentor somebody that was in trouble with the juvenile system or in some type of midlife crisis, and they would kind of mentor them, kind of be like a role model for them. So in a sense, they would not go into a life of crime or just in time to change this person before it's like too late for him to get out of the justice system. And I liked everything that you were saying, because it makes sense, because there's a lot of people out here that are youth and they're getting incriminated for sleeping at parks because they're homeless, and they're out there trying to get food and they're stealing things, and they're getting also penalized for that, rather than looking at the issue that is, why are they doing this, and how can we help? And like you were saying, they just penalize them and take their point of view away without justifying it. So I thought that was very neat. Thanks for the PowerPoint. And if you guys have any more meetings like this, I would like to become part of them, just to learn more of what I could do in a sense for everybody that I want to help.
Thank you for that. Do you want to be a member of the task force?
Yeah. I usually like to volunteer anywhere and everywhere, so sign me up.
What'd
you say, Marcela?
I said he can join our subcommittee.
And I just honor what you just said. As a young person, I am a student of our young people, and so thank you for bringing your expertise of seeing what's happening in the world around you and teaching us. And I want to also offer to you, if you would ever want to come to what I do for the Santa Fe Public Schools, you can come and be in a classroom with me, or be with kids that have been referred to me because they had a hiccup or a speed bump. But you're welcome to come, and you could be part of the solution.
That would be awesome. Yeah. I don't know how to put my information because there's no message tab.
I'll give you my number before we get off, and you can text me.
Okay.
And also, I just want to add that what this young man talked about needs. One of the things that we focus on in restorative justice, what are the needs? And I know we don't have enough time, but one day I want to share with you what a young person was able to tell me. And what he needed was a sense of belonging. He needed to know that he mattered. And think about that. That's what he needed in order to feel whole again and to allow himself to be the best version of himself. Is there any more questions?
I love it. And I'm actually serious about Eleazar being on our committee, on our task force. I need to figure out if he's working for the city as an intern, that's not a full-time thing. So essentially maybe he could. So we could talk about that offline, Eliezer. Maybe we could figure out if that's actually possible if you're serious about joining us. I think, did Annie, you had your hand up, right? I don't see it anymore, but I think you did.
Right? I did. You know, I just wanted to reiterate what everyone else said. It was a great presentation, so informative. I don't think I realized about all the different models of RJ, so that was really helpful. I also was really moved hearing about the work you both are doing in the community. I think that was really powerful. And as you know, I work with kids who've experienced trauma, and almost all of them end up being criminalized for their trauma behaviors. So this is really transformative for them. And they talk about that. And I don't know if you all know, we have the highest preschool expulsion rate in the country. So there's talk of it's not school to prison pipeline, it's preschool to prison pipeline, because these kids are dysregulated because of lack of safety at a really young age. And that rejection sets them on a path. So I think, you know, RJ can be integrated in so many different ways in our work. And I love what Emily said. Anything we do should model our belief system, our values. And I think integrating RJ and how we lead these discussions and create healing. You know, I also think everything we should do should leave everyone who participates better off. So I think that's really powerful. I think thinking of kind of a clear roadmap of how it can be integrated in the city. And I think, Marcella, you talked about the Longmont model that you are trained in. I'm sure you chose that for a reason. I really like the idea of the police officers being trained, because one thing I've struggled with is how to get buy-in, you know, because if we dictate a different way of doing things, that won't work. But if there's buy-in, then they become the agents of change. And I think just that could be really powerful. So I love this. I think it really creates beautiful avenues for us going forward.
Was that a question for Marcella or Mary Louise? I mean, I think the buy-in piece, I think, is important that we're going to have to think about for sure. Because we see what people write about, you know, when even as if no one was harmed physically, like the obelisk being destroyed, there was this, you know, approach like, take them to jail, and really just like tough on crime kind of approach. And the kind of comments that you saw in the paper were painful to read, actually, the way people approach their own community members. So anyway, we won't get into that topic.
I don't want to get into it, but I do want to mention, I can't get into it, but I do want to mention that that's why I really wanted to prop up the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission as a form of RJ that is about healing divisions in a community around an incident. There are many different forms, victim mediation. I mean, we went through them, right, of RJ. The right form has to be chosen for the right kind of thing. That's very important. And the Greensboro thing is such a, you know, I was on a panel reading proposals for I think it was the Kellogg Foundation. I think it was Kellogg, and it was a unity. They were going to give like $10 million to 10 organizations around the world on racial equity and justice. And I read and gave high marks to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission / community process on the southern border with Mexico that would go from California all the way to Texas, because there's so much binational harm perpetrated not just by institutions, but by extra official, like, you know, extra. So it's not just governments and border patrol and armies, but it's also, you know, narcotraficante. I mean, so there's so much harm that is being perpetuated. And so I loved this project because it was really creating a model that could have been transformative, not just for the southern border with Mexico, but really for every border situation, you know, that we see across the world. So anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Great. Thank you, Marcela. Gino, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you. A couple of things. What a great presentation, and a lot of information to observe, hear, process. being somewhat new to the task force, are we going to get a copy of that? Because I really would like to review it and let it digest a little bit. And I think with all the stuff I do with schools and other clients, to just have a working knowledge. I'll never have the depth that Marcella and Mary Louise have, but to have a working knowledge to be able to have the conversation with governmental entities. So one, my question is, will we receive a copy of this presentation? Chairs?
We can email it to our Valeria. But I also want to share with you guys, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to also add a video that was done by the Santa Fe Public Schools for a presentation that I had to do with the school board last week. And so it's like a 4-minute video, but it's with kids actually talking about what changed for them. And I think it would be good for all of us, since we all are investing in our kids in Santa Fe. You could see this video just to get a little idea of what it did for them personally. And this is kids that were actually, they did the restorative justice circles as well as the individual mediation type kids. So just so you know.
Okay. And two, in the presentation, you talked about 30 states adopting legislation. Are you aware of municipalities adopting ordinances that are going to help implement restorative justice? Because obviously sometimes we can lead from the cities up versus the state down. So being the lawyer, I'm always curious to see either model legislation or model, at a state level, or model ordinances, if either of you happen to have access to any.
Yeah, and we'll put that, in fact, we'll add that to like the end slide, or I'll just we can put together a list of resources like the video that she's talking about, that Mary Louise is talking about, and then some of the resources that we used for this presentation. Most of the statewide laws and investments that have been made really have been bottom up. They have been because cities and counties have done this work and want more investment in it, and we'll always come across, Monica always reminds us in our committee, our subcommittees, there's only so much that we have jurisdiction over, right? And so we need to make sure that as we're planning, we really, and so, there's only so much we can do at the city level. And so by doing sort of that bottom up approach, we can make some changes at the state level. I was honestly surprised that so many states, in preparing for this, actually had legislation, because I know of a handful like Colorado, California, even Arizona. Wow. Even Arizona. And I thought, wow, 30 states have this on their books at the state level. And we just know, so we really don't in New Mexico. And so we can be a model, but it's going to take a lot of education. And then I did want to say, to Emily's point about this is so important, how programs pick and choose which offenses or which crimes get admitted or don't get admitted. Some are good for RJ, some are not. I think victimless crimes, that's part of our task as a subcommittee, is to identify what doesn't need to be criminalized, right? And that again is the undoing of harms that institutions and that our policies are perpetrating communities. And so there's that. Then there are the ones that we can divert because people feel comfortable. But I'm a realist. I work, I'm a realist. It's what I do as an organizer and at Somos with our policy work. And so there will be crimes that will send people to prison. RJ works in all of those settings, right? And in all of those categories. And so for people we have seen, I have never participated in it, but people really are going to be in jail for a really long time. obviously we want sentencing reform at the national level, at the state level, but those RJ practices, those mediation, the reentry circles, victim mediation and offender, it can really heal people both in and out of the criminal justice system. So I'm not saying we need to create that path in Santa Fe. We need to look at all of it, but it really is a culture shift that we're going to have. It's going to take a long time to undergo because not many cities are doing it. There's a really good program that Mary Louise knows about in Albuquerque. The programs are just kind of hit or miss, but there isn't a real investment in a complete paradigm shift in New Mexico.
I was just going to add one thing talking about that paradigm shift in New Mexico. I think it's marvelous, Mary Louise, you're going to be meeting with Judge V. Hill because she can have a lot of influence, not just with CYFD and juvenile justice, but she's been really involved with the Court Improvement Project and with trained judges and lawyers throughout the state and some, kind of major reform issues statewide with juvenile justice. And she can be a leader in these changes, I think, in a big way. So, huge opportunity.
Thank you. Chris, did you unmute do you have a question?
Yeah.
We are 5 till 7:30, and I do want to just circle back with you all about our presentation, not give you full details, but we need to figure that out since it's next week. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm just curious about, we talked about how people are affected by being punished for their crimes, but how are their families affected by them being punished? And then under an RJ program, how are those families affected differently? I'm sure there's a lot of stats or statistics around that information. Is that easily available?
Oh, that is such an important point, Counselor, that I hadn't thought of including. And in fact, I don't know. Usually the research on the effectiveness of the programs focuses on the victim and recidivism and the court, all of the costs associated for that, which we know translates to the families. But I will look for research and analysis on the impact of perpetrators, I just want you to all know we don't use this language in RJ, but it helps people understand what we're talking about. If we only talked about people of concern and armed parties, people would get confused by what we're talking about. So I will look at that and I will make sure that we incorporate that somehow.
I want to add, Chris, in our program through the Santa Fe Public Schools, one of the things that I do in my sessions when I get referrals, I make sure and ask the right questions to our kids, like, who do you think this behavior affected? And until you ask that question, they're not really sure, other than the person directly. They don't think of that person's mom and dad and little sister and siblings. And so guess what we do? And you guys are going to be like, what? But I do this. So I meet with them in school, but after we're finished, those parents have already met me because I call them the night before and I remind them that the principal at their school cared about them enough to let me meet their child and that there was a hiccup, but I'm the person that gets to have the best job in the world, that gets to help them to make things right. And so after we finish our session, each of the kids call their parent. And guess what happens? They talk to each other's parent and they get to talk about how I know that I realized my behavior affected you too. And I can tell you that parents will keep my number on speed dial. And that trust is not just for that day, but for a lifetime. And that's one of the things that we've been doing. And for recidivism, you know what? The kids that we've worked with, and I always knock on wood when I say this, they haven't gotten into another fight, and they've come to ask for help when something's getting in the way of them being at their best. And I'll leave you with that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Chris?
I think that just when we were in Phoenix, one of the individuals who had been incarcerated said that there is a difference between accountability and punishment. And that has stuck with me. So it's just wanted to share that with everybody.
Yes, that was great. Yep. Well, I think we're getting to the time. We'll share the presentation with all of you. And yeah, I think there's really some potent pieces to this to add to our work and recommendations. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Marcela and Mary Louise, for your awesomeness and expertise and the work you do in the community. Appreciate it. And I guess in closing, we won't show you the presentation or the draft we have right now. It's too much, I would say, to talk about. But I think what I'd like to know is, do you think it's helpful to have members other than Chris and I be presenters for the updates, for a quarterly update to the governing body? I see a nod from, yes, from Marcela. Yes, Mary Louise. So, I mean, I think generally I'm getting the sense of that. And so my question is there someone that would like to join us in just preparing for this so that you can be a participant? I guess I'm asking for volunteers, but
happy to help with the presentation. I mean, it's like we did last time. I like the idea of us being there to show that we are a united group. We don't all have to talk, just be there and having them see our faces and know that there are people who are doing this work day in and day out that are a part of this committee. I just think it's important for not just the counselors and the mayor, but the whole community to see, and law enforcement. Right.
I agree. Definitely, I would love if all of you are able to make it, to be there with us. And you don't necessarily have to talk or say anything, but just the presence is, I think, important. So Marcela, I see, is wanting to jump into the mix.
I can help put something, I can opine about what should go in the presentation. I don't have to speak at the presentation, but we can have new members. How about we have Gino?
A couple things. One, I'm willing to review and edit. I feel I'm a little green to speak, number one. Number two, though, I am in labor relations negotiations until 6 o'clock that night. So that said, I can't guarantee that I'll be there on time, but as Renee and Chris both know, if Renee is estimating 5:30, then it's probably 6 or 6:15. So.
Well, the difference is we've changed our formatting. So presentations go fairly, like at the beginning, they go fairly quickly. It's just a matter of like how long it takes for, any kind of Q&A after that. We don't know. We never know. Last time I was actually surprised with the kind of questions we got and how long it went. But I think we're in a different place now. So we should be done by 6, though. Don't you think, Chris? I think we're finally getting our meetings a little bit more in order. The presentations are right at the beginning, too.
Yeah. Since I won't be available until 6, I think it's chancy with me. And so maybe my contribution can be in the review and editing portion so that I can contribute as a member.
Sounds good. Okay. We'll put you down for that. All right.
Renee, I'm going to be in Alabama.
Oh, man, Bruce. I'm just kidding. Hopefully it's on vacation.
No, master's clinic.
Oh, okay.
It's all good.
Well, you will be missed. If you're busy, Emily can be there.
Yeah, and I'm happy to look at anything prior.
Okay.
Likewise. And I have to sign off.
Okay. Yes.
Family members waiting. So.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Renee, I just, excuse me, just want to let the committee know my mother-in-law was put into hospice recently, and I have no idea what's going to happen with us in the next week or 2 or 3 or however long it takes. So I'm hoping I'll be at the meeting, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but God willing, I'll be there. But if
Okay.
not, you all know why.
Sorry, Chris. I'm sorry that it's gotten to that point. Sending you your family prayers and your wife. All right. Well, I think we're good. It doesn't have to be this elaborate presentation. We're making it very simple. It's an update. Punto. So
I would like to just be available for anything that you guys need me. I could be there for the meeting. Is this the 30th, right?
Yes, it's our governing body meeting, and it's our required presentation to the governing body just on the update of the last 3 months. So,
and this is the same, you just log in through the City of Santa Fe website?
Yeah, and actually, Eliasad, if you could, who's your supervisor? You said
Anna
Kel. Okay, so maybe we can connect with you. I don't know how to get a hold of you, but I can reach out to Anna and just see if there's a way that if you're serious about being with us and joining us on the task force, I actually think you'd be a good addition. If you're still interested, we can talk offline about that. I just don't want to mess up anything for you if you're wanting to work at the city as an employee after your internship. So because we can't really have employees on the task force, but we could talk about that later. So if you're interested, I will reach out to Anna about it and see if there's a possibility of ways that we can work with you and other things that I keep thinking about, any kind of other research support, community engagement support. I don't know. There's so many possibilities, but
yeah, I would be happy to be involved. Right now, I'm just trying to graduate with my master's from Highlands as a social worker, and that's why I'm there as an intern. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can from the community that I live in, which is here, and just get connected, learn a lot of the programs that are there, services. A big part of what I want to do is just learn how to manage funds and spread them, which is what the city of the Youth and Family Services Division does a lot. So I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be there for an employee, but right now as an intern, I know that they're starting a mobile hygiene unit, so I might be interested in that. But if it doesn't work out, I'm always open to do just anything that is pretty much involving social work, which is what you guys are doing.
I think so. I think there's a good connection there.
Well, it's a very good connection. I mean, you guys are helping people.
Oh, well, I think all these folks on here are helping people, and this task force trying to make recommendations for the governing body to make change in our community too. So I think everyone plays a role. So thank you all for being part of that. And thanks for joining us for our meeting. We'll be in touch. I don't know do you have a city email?
I don't. Well, you can get my Highlands email, which is E Flores, letter E Flores, and FLORES, live.nmhu.edu.
nmhu.edu.
Yeah, and I think I have it has a number after E Flores. I think it's 20. Let me just make sure.
So we'll be in touch with you, Eliasad, and then those of you that have expressed interest to help with the presentation, we'll be in touch probably tomorrow to send you a draft.
Can I make a quick announcement, Counselor?
Sure.
Everyone, 2 seconds. Somos is hiring 4 new positions, and it's development associate, administrative assistant, a policy fellow on workforce development issues. We have all these positions. And so spread the word. We're looking for good folks who are bilingual and who care about social justice issues.
And this is at the workforce?
No, this is for Somos Un Pueblo Unido.
Somos Un Pueblo Unido, okay.
Every place to be able to plug our positions.
I know that Somos Un Pueblo Unido works close with New Mexico Dream Team, because I was a part of the New Mexico Dream Team. I like to believe that I'm still part of them. I'm just not very active. I do stay in contact with Janet and what was that? Sorry, you cut
We
out.
didn't hear you, Marcela, but I think Marcela wants you to work at Somos Un Pueblo Unido, which is a nonprofit organization, and she's the executive director. So there you go. Here's a future job too.
The connections are real, guys.
Awesome. All right, y'all. We'll be in touch. Thanks for staying longer. If you have any questions, reach out. And thank you, Valeria, for putting all the stuff that we have together. So much to do. So thank you. Have a good night.
Nice work.
Yes.
If you want my telephone number, take it really quick so you can text me if you want to come shadow me.
Okay, I'll do that. What is it?
505-310.
Okay.
1789. And my name is Maria Luisa Romero. Bye,
awesome.
guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Louise. Your presentation
Have a good
was
one.
stellar.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night. That's so cool. I love it.
Oh, cute. So,
You in charge of the recording?
let's see. Let me stop the recording.
Can you? I can't do it.